Axel Foley rides through the evening streets of Detroit. The famous cop waves to passersby and keeps order in the city. People know him well and like him a lot. Finally, Axel arrives at the stadium to watch a hockey game with his partner. At the same time, another group arrives at the sports complex, obviously preparing something. His partner tells him that he only joined the police because of him. He's surprised to learn that Axel likes hockey.
Honestly, I assumed you didn't even like hockey.
Hockey happens to be in my blood. My great-grandfather was actually a hockey player in the Negro Leagues in Winnipeg, the Winnipeg Black Guys.
But after a few minutes, everything becomes clear. Foley has lured his partner here to prevent a robbery. Axel couldn't do it alone. He had long been suspended from the service because of his strange methods. Foley's partner realizes he's been fooled and gets worried. But Axel manages to cheer up his friend. He promises him a promotion and suggests they take action. The duo apprehends the first suspect, who is dressed in a security guard's uniform. After that, Axel goes to the locker room and finds the whole gang. The cop catches one of the thugs, but they manage to escape. Eddie Murphy steals the vehicle and starts a high-speed chase. The robbers prove to be fast. To catch up, Foley steals a snowplow and continues the chase. Axel asks his partner to call the station and report robbery. Foley's boss is not happy and orders them to stop and wait for backup. But Axel is stubborn and destroys everything in his way. The damage from his pursuit is many times greater than the damage from the robbery. Together with the criminal, Axel shovels a pile of garbage onto the street. He praises his partner for a great job and wishes him luck when he talks to the boss. Back at the station, colleagues applaud Foley, but his boss, Jeffrey Friedman, doesn't share their enthusiasm. He admits,
45 minutes. The police commissioner just screamed at me for 45 minutes straight.
Jeffrey tells Axel that he can no longer cover his watermelons. He has filed his papers and is preparing to retire. Foley will have to finish patrolling the streets and hole up in the department before he loses his job completely. Meanwhile, in Beverly Hills, attorney Jane Saunders arrives at the jail cell. She visits young Sam Enriquez. He is being held for the elimination of a police officer. Beauty promises to help the guy and asks him to tell her everything that happened to him on the day of the crime. Sam admits that he did indeed transport the goods with the undercover cop, but someone attacked them and the cop was eliminated. All he remembers is the black SUV they rammed. He does not know the faces or names of the criminals. That same day, Saunders makes her claim in court. She also wants an audit of the deceased cop's financial records. Saunders wants to prove that he worked for gangsters. The court grants the lawyer's request, and she informs her colleague. Jane calmly walks to her car, but a surprise awaits her. A group of unknown masked men hook Jane's car to a tow truck and push it out of the parking lot. After the incident, police officers gather at the scene. They interrogate Jane, but she repeats that all the attackers wore masks. She repeats the same thing to Billy, her father's friend who dragged her into the story. Billy makes the girl promise not to tell her father, but an hour later, he calls Axel. The old man assures his friend that Jenny is fine, but Foley should come to protect his daughter. Billy tells his buddy that he has found substantial evidence. The old man doesn't realize that he's being followed. He gets out of the car to look around, but the bandits catch him. Later, Jeffrey takes Axel to the airport. He is happy that the guy will now ruin the lives of his Beverly Hills colleagues, but he also advises him to improve his relationship with his daughter. Foley hasn't spoken to her in years. Finally, Axel arrives to Beverly Hills, but no one meets him at the airport, and he tries to call Billy, but he only hears the voicemail. Then the cop goes to a friend's office, where he meets two thugs. They dig through Billy's stuff. There's something in common between Axel and the famous donkey from Shrek. Axel talks the thugs down and steals a business card from his buddy's desk. But just then, the deception is revealed, and Foley has to fight back. The cop tries to leave without making a fuss, but his car is about to be towed for a parking violation. He starts arguing with the officer and steals her car for his own use. For this, the officer generously thanks the violator with pepper spray. But even with his eyes closed, he steals a car and tries to evade the chase. Beverly Hills is plagued by destruction and chaos after Foley's arrival. But the guy is saved by the appearance of a patrol.
You know, this is very embarrassing.
Two hot cops arrest the strange tourist and take him to the station. The perpetrator is handed over to Detective Bobby Abbott. Axel demands that Chief Taggart be called in. But first, Bobby wants to know why he came to Beverly Hills. The detective tells him that he knows everything about him and shows him his files. Axel decides to get rid of the handcuffs and shows a trick. Bobby won't let him go no matter what. Then Axel asks for a lawyer, and he has to call his daughter, who is a lawyer. Jane hears her father's voice and hangs up. But when Foley calls her a third time, she agrees to come to his aid. Foley can't hold back his emotions when he sees his beautiful grown-up daughter. Jane turns out to be very much like her father. She rejects the snotty greeting and asks the old man to tell her why he has come. Bobby shows up and Axel immediately suspects that something is going on between him and his daughter. He decides to find out later. For now, the cop goes to the office of the police chief, John Taggart. When Taggart sees Axel, some obscene words fly out of his mouth. But afterward, he hugs the guy and admits he's glad to see him. At an old friend's office, Foley meets Captain Grant. He's the head of the Prohibited Substances Unit. Grant rebukes Axel that her daughter defends of a cop killer. He claims that Enriquez is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Meanwhile, Jane returns to Bobby to say hello. The couple discusses their recent breakup, but the stubborn girl refuses to admit her guilt. Afterwards, father and daughter leave the station. Jane asks her father to fly out of Beverly Hills and leave her alone. But Axel refuses. He tells her that Billy is missing and that he has to find and save his friend. Jane agrees to be patient for a while, but asks her father to talk to her less. Foley tries to explain to his daughter why he left her years ago. He assures her that it was for her own safety. Jane changes the subject and offers to talk about the Enriquez case. She assures her father that the boy is innocent and she has to prove it. The duo goes to the impound lot, where Billy called Axel the day before. Axel uses his talents as a chatty guy again and charms the guard. And guard allows guests to enter the area. He is so excited that he even shows them how Billy infiltrated the property. In the end, he lets them in. The duo finds Enriquez's car. He said the truth. The car has traces of black paint. Axel also finds a camera in the cabin, but there's no memory card in it, and the cop suspects that Billy took it. Foley suspects surveillance. He finds a tracking device under his daughter's car and offers Jane some playtime. Duo leaves the impound lot, and Axel attaches the device to a school bus. They park in a secluded spot and watches as the bus is chased by a black SUV with two thugs. The bandits wake up a little later when they see a device attached to the bus. Axel continues to sort out his personal relationship with his daughter. He asks her why she changed her last name. Jane admits that she doesn't want to think of him as her father. Axel and Jane follow an SUV and they come to some VIP club. This time, Foley is unable to convince the receptionist to let them in. Jane comes to her father's aid. She introduces herself as a member of the administration, and the two go up to the top floor. It is clear that they were being followed not just by bandits, but by Grant's men. Grant assures Axel that it's all for the case. Billy stole the evidence and his men try to find the old man, but Foley proves to be too clever. He notices the expensive watch on the cop's hand and realizes that Grant is lying, he is corrupt. On the way, father and daughter argue again, and Jane asks Axel to return to Detroit. But Foley refuses to leave until he finds his friend. Axel rents a hotel room, and in the morning, he continues his investigation. Foley arrives at the address he found in Billy's office and discovers Grant's mansion. His men are there. Axel returns to his daughter and invites her to finish the job together. Jane again begs the old man to fly away and leave her alone. But after some persuasion, she agrees. Bobby and Taggart want Foley to leave their city as well. But Foley doesn't change his plans. He notices Bobby's car behind him and tries to find out from his daughter what happened between them. Because of his chatter, the man does not realize that the detective is not the only one watching them. Two cars block Axel's driveway and open fire. A shootout breaks out on a busy street. Bobby tries to help his ex and her father. The detective rescues Foley and Jane when the criminal pulls a shotgun on them. The company manages to escape. Bobby identifies the criminals. He shows Axel their personal files and tells him the details. They find clues and become convinced that Grant is responsible for the assassination attempt. Axel shares his suspicions with Taggart, and the old friends argue. The chief kicks Foley out and orders him to leave city. Taggart also pulls Bobby off the investigation. Bobby suspects that Foley was right, and that Taggart might be in league with Grant. Axel refuses to leave until he finds his friend. His daughter and Bobby agree to help him find out the truth. The company checks and finds a house for sale next to Grant's mansion. They need help, and Axel turns to his old friend, Rainbow Serge, who knows every realtor in town.
Okay. Detective Abbott.
Oh, he's what?
Abbott.
Abbott. Detective Abbott. Abbott.
Serge welcomes Axel's company and takes them to the mansion. The realtor is very strange woman. They come up with the legend that Axel is looking for a home for his daughter and her young husband. While Jane and Bobby pose as happy newlyweds, Axel sneaks into the backyard and keeps an eye on the Grant mansion. A cop sneaks into the garage and finds boxes of illegal substances. He also finds the wrecked black car from which the cop was eliminated. Foley returns to his friends and the company leaves the house. Just then, security informs Grant that the cop was at the mansion. Axel shows the photos to his daughter and she asks him to drop the investigation. There is enough evidence to clear her client. But Foley and Bobby disagree. They want to follow through and find Billy. An argument ensues between the men and Jane. She simply refuses to continue the conversation and leaves. Bobby and Axel go to Enriquez's uncle to get some help from him. On the way, Bobby tries to convince his buddy that Jane really wants to make up with him. They find a bar owned by Chileno, Enriquez's uncle. The old gangster looks very weird. He's standing in the middle of the stage, singing wind-up songs. But Axel's enthusiasm was not appreciated by the performer. His guards draw their weapons. To quiet the rowdy guest, Enrique's uncle agrees to talk to the cops. He confirms that Grant works with the cartel and that Sam's partner was killed at his behest. The old pop star also talks about a detective who was caught a few days ago and is being held captive. The cops have no time to go to the station. They are arrested in the parking lot by their colleagues on Grant's orders. Grant also shows up, and as if by accident, he finds white powder in the car. Obviously, it is a setup. Axel and Bobby are arrested. Privately, Grant tells Foley that he has no intention of keeping him alive. When Foley is alone in the cell, he notices an air vent. He gets free of the handcuffs, opens the lid, and sets a trap for Grant. Axel knocks out his opponent and goes after Bobby. Together, they try to escape, but a siren goes off in the department, and they have to go to the roof. There they find a helicopter. It turns out that our Bobby is also a pilot, but not a very good one. They have to hijack a police helicopter. The two can't gain altitude, and passers-by run away from the dangerous blades in fear. Grant gathers all the cops and mercenaries to eliminate the dangerous duo. He catches up with the helicopter and tries to convince Axel to surrender. Grant gets rejected. He starts shooting. Taggart arrives on the scene and tries to figure out what is going on. He asks Axel to leave the chopper, but Grant continues to shoot his colleagues. The guys start to get dizzy from the violent shaking. Finally, they land on a golf course. They lie to the players that there's an old lady in a helicopter and she needs help. After, the duo steals a golf cart and runs away. Foley has a thing for fast cars, but he decides to replace the golf cart with something more familiar. Axel asks a parking lot security guard to lend him a car. Of course, he will not give him any keys. Communication with Foley clearly benefits Bobby. He steals the car keys and the cops move on. Meanwhile, Jane arrives at Taggart's office to get the details. Taggart tells the girl that he believes her father. Grant is a corrupt cop. Jane calls her father, but he doesn't answer. Foley is unaware that his daughter has been kidnapped as well. Axel and Bobby check out the wharf from which Grant's gang is shipping goods. They notice Billy's car and decide to check it out. But a few minutes later, the two find the hostage himself. Axel signals to his friend, and Billy has new strength. He provokes the thugs to let their guard down. Then Foley and Bobby attack. The company leaves the building and steals Grant's truck. There is another armed chase, but this time Axel manages to throw off the tail. Billy admits that he hid the SD card and a knife in his office. Foley calls her daughter, but her phone is answered by Grant. The trader boss offers to meet with the cop, promising it's the only way to keep Jane alive. Grant says that he and Jane are waiting for Foley in an old abandoned warehouse. But Axel tracks Jane's phone and finds out that his daughter is being held at the mansion. His friends tell him that without backup, they're finished. They can't call it because they're fugitives themselves. Then Axel decides to call a backup his own way. He hits every passing police car to get noticed and followed, but does a lot of damage. Billy happily admits that he missed it. Jane tries to figure out what Grant is going to do to her. Grant openly says that he will send Jane to her ancestors. Now Jane can only trust that her father will rescue her soon. Axel's truck hits the dumpsters and flies into the mansion. A fierce firefight ensues. Friends cover Foley, and he sets out to find his daughter. Taggart also joins the chaos. The old man pulls a shotgun out of the trunk and goes to help his friends. He proves that he can still do a lot. Jane discreetly removes the handcuffs. She knocks out the guard, takes his gun, and runs out of the room. Axel doesn't notice his daughter, but he runs into Grant. The traitor tries to talk Foley down and manages to distract him. When Jane enters the room, Grant grabs the gun and points it at Jane. Axel covers Jane with his body and saves her, but is shot. Good boy Bobby eliminates Grant and looks at Jane, who is crying next to her wounded father. later, the mansion is surrounded by police and emergency vehicles. Taggart apologizes to Billy for not believing him and blames himself for what happened. A wounded Foley is carried past the old folks. Jane is kept out of the ambulance and stays with Bobby. A few days later, Axel begins to recover. He escapes from the hospital room to eat a normal meal. Jane sees her father's bed empty and knows where to look for him. The girl is glad that the old man is well and tells him the details of the case. Grant and several of his associates have been eliminated. The rest are in custody. Sam Enriquez is cleared of all charges, and this is her first successful case. For the first time in days, Axel and Jane manage to have a normal conversation. Foley apologizes for leaving the family, and the girl apologizes for being very rude. Axel's mood gets better and better. It's cool to have a daughter who will always be there to help you get out of your chair. That same night, Taggart and Billy are on duty outside the hospital. They want to make sure their friend doesn't escape. But Axel shows up in the back seat and asks his buddies to take him to a restaurant for a steak.